Welcome to the quality scoring training video. I'm going to teach you how to quality score videos for later analysis. We'll use 6 parameters to score videos, and they are illumination, duration, focus, content, stability, and pressure. Each video will get a score of either 0, 1, or 10, with 0 representing excellent quality, 1 being undesirable but useful,
and 10 meaning the video cannot be used for later analysis.
So in the end, if any video scores a 10 in any of the 6 parameters, we will fail it and not use it for analysis. This is important to remember. Please review each section as needed. So we'll start out with illumination. This parameter is a determination of the level of illumination and contrast of the video independent of afocal vessels. Sometimes superficial out-of-focus vessels can diminish illumination in parts of the field of view. These should not be considered when assessing the illumination quality. So we'll start out with a score of 0. This means that there is even illumination across the entire field of view for the entire duration of the video. Also, there is sufficient contrast such that small vessels can be distinguished from background tissue. Here are a few examples of good illumination. Notice that the intensity of light is even across the entire field of view, and you can see the smallest of vessels. All of these videos would get a score of 0 for illumination. Let's move on. A score of 1 for illumination means that the video borders on being too dark or too bright to distinguish important features, and/or illumination across more than half the field of view changes drastically over the course of the video. Here are a few examples of poor illumination. In these videos, the small vessels in the background are a little more difficult to see. This is not an ideal situation, but can still be used for later analysis. We would score these videos with a 1. While this video is still a little bit too bright, we can still see the small vessels in the background, so while it's not an ideal situation, we can still use it for analysis. When videos are too dark or too bright, such that analyzable features cannot be distinguished,
we give a score of 10.
Here's an example of unacceptable illumination. Go too bright, and then we can go too dark. So it's pretty straightforward. So that's the illumination parameter. Let's move on to duration. This parameter is a measure of the length of the video and how it represents the actual pathology. Scores are a direct function of the length of the video in units of frames or seconds. So if a video is longer than 5 seconds or 150 frames, it will receive a score of 0. Here are some examples of good duration. Watch the timestamp. You can watch the time code in any video player. Just be careful to watch the last few frames. Anything 5 seconds or longer should receive a score of 0. Any video that is greater than 3 seconds or 90 frames, but not greater than 5 seconds, should receive a score of 1. Here are some examples of acceptable duration. Again, watch the timestamp. What you'll notice is that all of these videos are at least 3 seconds, and none of them go over 5 seconds, so they get a score of 1. Lastly, a video will get a score of 10 if the video is less than 3 seconds or 90 frames long. Here are some examples of unacceptable duration. All the clips are less than 3 seconds. Keep an eye on the timestamp. So now that we're done with duration, let's move on to focus. This parameter is used to judge the level of focus in the video such that a successful analysis can be performed. Ideally, you should be able to visualize the flow. Please note that this score should only be assessed for one plane of focus. For a video to get a score of 0, all the vessels, both small and large, should be in focus. Generally, if you can see individual plasma gaps or red blood cells, then focus is satisfactory. Also, the focus should remain consistent throughout the entire video. Here are some examples of good focus. Make note of the sharp edges along the smallest of the vessels. Notice that you can see red blood cells, individual plasma gaps, and the lines of the vessels look nice and clear. So while this video is dark, you have to keep in mind that we're only scoring for individual parameters one at a time. So in terms of focus, this video would get a 0. All the small vessels are in focus, some of the large vessels are in focus, and in general, you can see things pretty clearly. Let's move on to focus scoring of 1. If some of the areas, less than half, of the field of view are out of focus, or the edges of the vessels are slightly out of focus, a video should get a score of 1. Also, videos will get a score of 1 if the focus changes over the course of the clip. At least 3 to 5 seconds of the video must be in focus at any given time. Here are some examples of acceptable focus. Notice that the focus is not perfect among the smallest of vessels. All of these videos would get a score of 1. The focus isn't perfect, but we could still tell that there are vessels there, and we could still quantify flow in those vessels. Keep in mind that we're only scoring one parameter at a time, so don't pay attention to these bubbles when scoring for focus. Let's round out the focus parameters by defining the score of 2. If a video is completely out of focus such that no small vessels can be seen and/or flow cannot be appreciated, then the video will get a score of 10. This score is also applicable if the video does not stay in focus for more than 3 seconds. Here are some examples of unacceptable focus. Notice that the focus is very poor amongst the smallest of vessels. All of these videos have been slowed down to help illustrate the point, but what you'll notice is that the focus in the smallest of vessels is very poor, such that we can't really determine the type of flow or the existence of vessels altogether. In the end, these videos will all be very hard to analyze because they are out of focus, so we will score them with a 10.